Rebecca Strong, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, I'm going to have to ask you how and why you got interested in law enforcement. That's always my standard question for somebody who's an active duty cop right now.
Sure. I mean, that's a good question. So, when I was in fourth grade, a family friend gave me a Nancy Drew. Remember the case files? They were like little paperbacks,
Yes,
not written
Nancy.
by the author, but for the estate.
Hmm.
They gave me one of those for my birthday. It was like a $3 book at the time, and I loved it. I was 12, I think, and I couldn't get enough of it, 11 or 12. So I read through all the Nancy Drew books, like every
Mm,
single one of them. Then I went through the Hardy Boys books, and I kind of cut my teeth on cozies. I was
okay.
12, 13. I wasn't really allowed to read anything else.
Yeah.
But I from about that time, I always wanted to be a cop.
Excellent. Now, any family members in law enforcement?
In my family, not a single one. No,
Really?
I'm the first.
So, what did your mom or dad say? It was say, "Hey, I want to be a cop." What was their reaction?
I actually thought they would have more of a problem
Okay.
with it, but they were very supportive. A little, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? But they were actually far more supportive than I thought they would
Now,
be.
did you go to college first?
I
Or
did, yeah.
okay. Did you get a
Mhm.
4-year degree or a 2-year degree?
It was 4 year. For a while,
Okay.
I thought, well, maybe I'll just be a lawyer. So I got a degree in pre-law,
Oh, okay. Well,
and then
that's in the neighborhood, I guess.
well, it is. But my sophomore year, I had a professor who was an attorney, and he was a great attorney. I'm sure I would have hired him, but he was an a-hole. Like he was just, and I'm sitting in class and I'm like, is this going to be the kind of person I got to work with? So it was, yeah, that was the year I decided I'm not going to be a lawyer.
Now, if you were gonna be a lawyer, did you kind of gravitate towards criminal law, or it's all about the law and order kind of thing, or was it
You,
you didn't know yet?
well, thinking about being a lawyer was kind of like I thought my parents would react badly. So I was trying to kind of make them happy,
Yeah.
but I still wanted
Okay.
to be a cop. So I hadn't even gotten that far as far
Okay.
as what kind of law. Um, So yeah, I didn't get that far. It was kind of a diversion, if you
Okay. Gotcha. Wow,
will.
that's interesting. That's yeah, like we were talking, off air, there's a lot of legacy stuff with, sometimes it's like a 50-50 crapshoot when I ask people that question, it's like, well, did you have any family members,
Yeah.
in law enforcement? A lot of them, it's like, yeah, my dad, my
Hmm.
uncle, whoever. So yeah, that's interesting.
Not a
So
single person.
you graduate from college, you're pre-law, and did you start hunting for police jobs right away, or did you do other stuff, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I actually went back home for a while and I applied to the Secret Service.
Oh,
I thought
cool.
I was going to be a hot shot fed right off the bat.
Yeah.
So I only had the experience for the uniform division, but after 9 months of not hearing anything, I was like, you know what? I can't. My parents just picked up and moved back to Georgia, where we're from. So it was just me in Pennsylvania by myself. And I was like, I can't, I got to get out.
Okay.
So I just kind of abandoned that and moved to Northern Virginia, where my brother, he's Army. So he was at Fort Belvoir. And I lived with them for a while. And that's kind of how I ended up in Northern Virginia.
Okay. Now, what kind of like odd jobs did you do like when you were trying for the Secret Service? Do you remember?
I actually worked for a bank. There was a small privately owned bank that was headquartered in my town.
Okay.
And I interned with them. And then I got a job for about a year and a half after college.
That wasn't your cup of tea.
Oh, no, no, I don't want to do that. Absolutely not. I
Okay.
learned some good stuff, but I don't want to do that.
All right. Now, did you get hired by a department then went to the academy, or did you go to the academy first? What'd that look like?
Well, our academy at my department is our academy. There is a regional academy, but we put our own on.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, I got hired, went through the background process in under 6 months.
Oh, that's
I
quick.
think
Yeah.
I applied in January of '04 and I was sitting in the academy July 1st.
Oh, geez. Yeah,
So,
that's fast.
it was
That is
fast.
that's fast. So to give the listeners and watchers idea, how big of a department are we talking? Like how many
Our
members?
sworn strength is just under 900.
Okay, that's big.
Now,
Yeah,
obviously, we don't have that many officers because, like every department, we're struggling with retention.
sure.
But we're the second largest local police department in the state.
Okay.
So there's only
Oh,
one that's bigger than us.
oh, that's huge. So you have your own academy.
Hmm.
You know, you get hired. You go through, you go through the background stuff. You get hired,
Yeah.
and you go into the academy. What did that look like? Was it like military-ish, where there's barracks and you stay overnight, or what? What did it look like?
So there weren't barracks. You had to provide your own housing, but other than that, it was kind of a
Okay.
boot camp with a lot of classroom thrown in. Very very paramilitary
Okay.
feel. So
So obviously you're wearing a uniform. We called it our Mr. Goodwrench uniform because it was this cheap ass, just icky uniform, and they just slapped like a police patch on the shirt. It's like what mechanics wore, but there couldn't be any lint on it, and it had to be creased. I dry cleaned mine,
yeah, ours was
and
kind of like that dark blue.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just and did you have the gun belt without the gun, or like a blue plastic gun, or what did that look like?
At the time, they didn't issue. Now they issue sim guns to all the recruits going through. At the time, they
Hmm.
didn't have them. We trained on red guns, so we had our full belt that we had to wear,
Yeah.
but we just didn't take a gun home.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
So
for us,
mhm.
they wanted us wearing the belt, I guess, to get used to it, and it makes sense. And they gave us our long batons, and we had baseball hats. And like if you're in the classroom, you can't wear the hat, but if you're outside the classroom, you better be wearing your hat.
We
And you're
didn't even have baseball
saluting,
hats.
you're saluting everything except the fire extinguisher. And sometimes we're saluting the fire extinguisher. It was really funny. So lots of marching, lots of running, lots of, is that what it looked like for you?
Pretty much. We didn't actually salute, but we
Oh,
had to
okay.
line up on one side of the hallway. We had to stay in line, and if anybody passed, every single one of us had to say, "Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir." So it'd be 30 people saying in a
Yeah,
row.
I know. Then, like later on, I'm a sergeant, and it's like I'd have to go to the academy for something. And I was like avoiding those recruits like crazy because I
Hmm.
don't. 100 hands are coming up. It's like, good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. I'm like, yeah, 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 guys, calm down, calm down. I'm not one of your
Uh-huh.
instructors. Just as you were. Go away. I don't want to
I
talk to
now
you.
know how annoying it is.
Yes, it's kind of funny, but
So yeah, very very much the same.
okay. Now,
Yeah.
when you were in the academy, do you remember what the PT standards were back then?
We uh we were going off the Cooper standards at the time,
Mm.
and were until about 2 years ago, when we dropped all PT standards about 2 years ago.
Oh my God, is that
So
stupid?
yeah,
Oh,
so it was
I
a
could
high
go on and
jump.
on about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we had the typical high jump. You ran a mile and a half. You had a sprint, push-ups. Was the rest of it bench press? And there's one other thing, but I can't remember what it was.
Okay. I know
So,
some departments would have different standards for females to males. Did you guys do that?
mm-mm.
Yeah, we didn't either. I'm glad we didn't. It's like either you can do it or you can't do it.
I mean, you only had to do like 25 push-ups. Anybody can do 25 push-ups if you practice. Like if you
Right.
actually work out that muscle. Um,
Yeah, I
I mean,
remember the big thing for me, like push-ups, sit-ups, what are the push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups? Pull-ups were hard because, it's like you had to lock it out for
yeah,
every one of them. And I'm like, oh God.
we didn't have to
So
do that, thank God.
we we did the first like week we were there, they did the test, and it's a baseline. They want to see
Mhm.
what
Yep.
kind of shape you're in.
Hmm.
And I breezed through everything, and then it came time for the run. You had to do a mile and a half in under 12 minutes. I'll
Yep.
never forget it. And we're in the gym. It's January in Wisconsin. And
Yeah.
it's like you're leaning over like this, running, going in circles a few zillion times. And I
Hmm.
was like on lap 4, my calf cramped up like this, and I just went ass over tea kettle. I just tumbled down. This instructor comes running over with this big medical bag that was bigger than her, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Cramp, really bad cramp." And she's like, she rolls her eyes and is like, "Get up, start walking." And I'm like, "What about this?" She said, "You failed. You're done." And I'm like, do I?" She said, "Don't worry. There's another one in the middle of the class, in the middle, and then there's another one at the end." So I
Mhm.
barely made the mile and a half in under 12 the
Yeah.
last time. And I'm just like, oh God. Oh, that was very stressful. But yeah, that was the academy. How long was yours? How many months? Do
Six
you remember?
months.
Yeah, so was ours.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're changing things around. Like you said, when I first started to get into the academy, the PT test was a flex arm hang of 45 seconds. Your chin couldn't go under the chin up bar.
Mhm.
Ugh. Then you had to do like the dummy drag thing, and if you slipped, you
Uh,
were done. And then it was a 6 foot wall. You had to go over an X amount of time,
mhm.
and then you had to run a half mile in under 4 minutes.
Under 4 minutes.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, you were cooking.
Huh.
It was,
We did all that stuff, but it wasn't part of our. You had to pass the
yeah,
physical standards.
that
We
was
we
just
did
to
all
get
that.
in. Yeah,
We just
right.
didn't have to pass those particular
Yeah,
things.
and then, if maybe 5, 6 years later, they changed it to an obstacle course that was just dummied down. And I'm like, they were picking cops randomly, and it was truly random. I'm working late shift, midnight to 8. I'm tired and I just want to go home. And they're like,
Yeah.
report to the academy. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what for?
Mm.
And so they're looking for guinea pigs. And I'm just like, ugh, fine. So I don't have PT gear. I don't have like tennis. I'm wearing combat boots, and
Mhm.
all my stuff. And they're like, you could take your vest off and your belt off if you want. And I'm just like, yeah, that sounds great. So I go through it, and the girl is like, you had one of the best times since we started doing this. And I'm like,
Oh,
I'm tired. I'm not in the best of shape right now. I've been working late shift forever. And I said, and at the time I was like in my late 30s. I said, you mean to tell me like 21-year-old kids aren't doing better than me? And she said, no, it's really sad. And I'm
yeah.
like,
Mhm.
that's pathetic. And I'm like,
Yep.
wow.
Yep.
So in your academy class, how many people were there?
I think we started with 28 and graduated 24.
Oh, okay, that's pretty small for that big of a
Mhm.
department. I'm surprised.
Well, we weren't that big back then. This was in
Oh,
'04.
okay.
So I think we were at a sworn strength of about just under 600 at
Oh,
that
okay.
point.
But
Yeah,
still,
a little bit smaller.
that's kind of a smaller class. How
Mhm.
many women were in there?
Four of us.
What was that like?
Um, I had nothing to compare it to. And
Okay.
I think I came in with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, like I had something to prove.
Okay.
Um, so for me, I was just gonna go and I was just gonna like balls to the wall every day to kind of prove myself.
Right.
Um, it really didn't affect me how many women there were because
Okay.
I hadn't, I didn't know till I got there, so it was what it was.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, when I got hired, it was you had to have 25% majority male, 25% majority female, 25% minority female, 25% minority male.
Oh wow.
So they had like a hard time finding females
Hmm. Oh
that
yeah.
would do the job or could pass the PT.
Hmm.
That was the challenge, and that went by the wayside. And yeah, I could do another podcast about that. But anyways, so you graduate. Well, let me ask you this. Did you wind up going to like a sheriff's department, a city department? We're going to be a little bit vague, to protect your where you're
Sure.
working.
Well, my academy was for my police department. They had started it. They started their own academy maybe 4 years, 5 years
Mm,
earlier, and maybe more than that. So when I graduated, I went to work for it's a county police department in Northern Virginia. It's not sheriffs; we're actually police. We have a sheriff's department, but they do other jobs.
okay,
So when I graduated, I went right out to the street to my
cool.
training period.
So you go out on the street as a brand new copper. What equipment was issued to you when you first started? You remember?
Yeah, the usual. We had the 5 point hat. We also
Cool.
had. They also gave us the Russian hat back then. I don't know if you ever
I
got
love the big fuzzy hat. I love the fuzzy hat. I still have my fuzzy hat.
that.
And it's funny, we had a chief that absolutely hated those things. He came from out east, and
Oh,
he was gonna, we're a bunch of country bumpkins in Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
yeah.
according to him.
Hmm.
And if we knew he was coming to a scene, we would all run to our cars and put on those hats just to get his goat.
So it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Like cops are the same everywhere.
Yep. So
Um,
you got the fuzzy floppy hat.
mhm.
What else did you get?
We had our, the typical Sam Brown that you wear over the inside belt. We had
Hmm.
holster. We had a collapsible baton,
Yep.
pepper spray, extra magazines, handcuff holders. And then we all had to buy our own flashlight holder
Okay. You
because
had to buy your own
we wanted
flashlight, right?
smaller flashlights. Back then we had the big ones. They were like
Yeah.
the
Yep.
D cell,
Yep.
the D
The,
cell ones.
the big mag
So
lights.
yeah.
Then there
So we
was
all bought little ones
the
and got a new holster for it.
okay, and then the stream lights. I like those. Those were the rechargeable ones. Those were really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I
We
like
all
those
got
a lot.
streamlines. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Now for your firearm, did you have to buy your own or did they give it to you?
No, they provided it.
Okay. What kind of a pistola?
It was a Glock 21. It was a big old hand cannon.
Yeah, the 21. That's
45s. We shot
oh, the
45s at
45.
first. Yeah.
Okay.
We've gone to nines, but we shot 45s for a long time.
Wow. Yeah. What do you have right now?
I have a Glock 19,
Okay, so they
9
stuck
millimeter.
with Glock.
Yeah, they stay with
Okay.
Glock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I first started, they were transitioning from the 357 wheel gun to the
Mm.
Glock 22, which was the 40 caliber.
Okay.
So being a new recruit, I got the Glock. And
Nice.
it's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And
High speed.
although, yeah, oh yeah, we're high speed, low drag, let me tell you. And since then, we went from that to the Smith and Wesson M&P 40 caliber. Then we went to the SIG 9 millimeter.
Oh, I jumped around quite a bit.
Oh yeah, we did. I mean,
Huh.
well, i- one of the reasons why we went to the Smith and Wesson was I had a good buddy that was in a foot chase. It turned into a gun battle, and his gun
Mm.
jammed, and he got shot 5 times in the stomach and the
Shit.
chest. And it went from he shot the bad guy, I think, 2 or 3 times.
What was the
Complete.
gun that jammed? What was he carrying?
It was a Glock 22. The
Really?
model 22 40 caliber, but it
Hmm.
was like the third or fourth generation. It wasn't the ones that we got when I first came out. Those
Okay.
things were indestructible. You could,
Huh.
oh my God, they're great.
Yeah. I mean,
But
that's
then,
what I've always heard about Glocks in
yeah,
general. It's
yeah,
surprising.
yeah, the chief was just like, okay, we're done with Glock. And it's
Huh.
like, good. It's like, I got no love for it. So
Yeah.
we went to that, and now they went back to Glock 9 millimeters. So it's like, whatever. It's like, and they have the little red aim dot thingies on the pistols now.
We're getting those.
You
They're in the
know,
process of getting those.
yeah, I've talked to people that have them and they absolutely love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hey, I'm
Okay.
still an old iron sights guy, and it's like that's what I'm used to. Yeah, yeah, I have an HR 218, so I have to qualify every year. I go to the academy and qualify,
Hmm.
and I have a little SIG P365,
Okay.
and that's a great gun. Oh my God, I can
Yeah.
shoot pretty good with that. So you go to field training. Oh wait, I should ask you. Back then there was no body cameras. Were
Nope.
there tasers?
Yeah.
Okay.
You had to be experienced. You had to be chosen by your squad. So you wouldn't get it until maybe a year or two in.
Oh,
They
okay.
wanted a little seniority before you got it, but we did have
Hmm.
tasers.
Okay.
And I
Very
ended up carrying one a few years later.
okay.
Hmm.
All right. So what was your impression of field training? Was it what you expected? Better, worse?
So my FTO had a little bit of a reputation.
Uh-oh.
Um, he
Oh
was
no.
he was he had a reputation for being aggressive. DUIs were his thing.
Ugh,
He'd get the MAD award every year. It was his thing.
ugh.
Um, so he's the kind of guy that a lot of people don't like. He was abrasive,
Yeah.
but he was a good teacher. He
Okay.
was old school. I mean, he taught me the ins and outs. I didn't like him very much at the end of the 45 days either, but he was a very good teacher.
Okay.
He knew what he was doing. He just liked to piss people off. That was kind of his. He got his jollies on that.
Okay. Yeah, that's different. It's funny, I talk to different cops from like all over the world. And you have some that are on this like quest to, end drunk driving.
Mhm.
And where I worked, if I worked midnight to 8 for 13 years, if you went out and we called them pickles, hey, look, there's a pickle, and if you went out hunting for a pickle at 2 o'clock in the morning, everyone on that shift would ostracize you and hate you.
Really?
Oh God, yes, because
Huh.
we're handling shootings. We're going to
Yeah.
stabbings. We're going to shootings. It's like, okay, now you grab, some guy that had a few too many drinks. Okay. Now
You
you're
don't
inside for
really,
3 or 4 hours
yeah.
with this arrest. Okay, I'm around live gunfire all night long. I'm
Wow.
running after bad guys in alleys.
Oh,
I'm going to the shooting in progress.
hmm.
Meanwhile, you're inside saving the world with your one drunk driver. No.
That actually makes a lot of sense. In that environment, our county wasn't like that back then.
Hmm.
After 2 a.m., not much happened. That's all we did was
Oh,
hunt for
okay.
DUIs. It was rare that we had a shooting to respond to. Like
Oh,
that was
okay.
that was the big night. That was the excitement. Now it happens every day. We have shootings every day, but back then we had plenty of time to go hunting.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
were
it's
expected to.
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a different mindset. Like our motorcycle cops, they'll go after the pickles for sure.
Mm.
That's their world. They can pump one of
Pickles. I
those out.
like that. I'm gonna start using that.
Yeah, they can pump one out. They could pump that arrest out like if it wasn't like a fatal accident or
Hmm.
something crazy, like in an hour. And we're all like, "How did you do that?"
Nice.
It's like we do them all the time. It's like, all right, fine. It's like I wish for me it would be a 4 or 5 hour safari of trying to figure out what,
All the
you know,
paperwork. Hmm.
yes. It's
Yep.
like, oh, this sucks. So
Interesting.
was it what you expected though, or not?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah. It was kind of along the lines of what I was expecting.
All right.
I
So,
would run up on situations. I kind of came from a sheltered home, sheltered environment. So I
mm.
came across stuff. I'm like, whoa, this is a first for me. But other than that, it was pretty much what I was expecting.
Okay. Now, you started out on patrol taking assignments. How long was field training for you guys?
45 working days, but we had a 28-day cycle where you'd work for 5 days, you'd be off for 5 days, you'd work for
Oh,
five
wow.
days, be off. So it
Okay.
was kind of nice. But
Yeah.
so whatever 45 days fit into that, it was about 45 working days.
So you're off field
Three,
training. You
3 months,
pass. Okay. You pass
roughly.
that, and then you're still on probation, I'd guess.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
the remainder of that year
Okay.
of
Yeah. Same with
service.
us. It was
Yeah.
about a year.
Hmm.
And you kind of bounce around from one squad to another. You're the new person, so
Hmm.
you kind of fill the slots. And now you get a little bit of seniority under your belt. What shift were you working? And did you have a partner or what did that look like?
No, we ride solo. We always have.
Oh, okay.
So I trained on midnights and I stayed on midnights because that was what I had requested out of the academy. But about a year and a half in, I was like, man, I can't. I'm 20. I'm like 24 at this point, 25. And I was like, I can't do this. I am not made to sleep during the day.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's tough.
I didn't feel good. You just
Right.
never had any energy. I was sick all the time. So I switched to evenings at that point, and I did evenings for about 6 years,
What's evenings? What
7 years.
hours?
4 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
have days, evenings, and midnights.
Yeah, were you married or have kids back then?
No, I was single then.
Yeah, that's where I worked. A lot of the single people worked for in the afternoon till midnight.
Hmm.
That was kind of like the young person single squad.
It's not great for families.
No, that's
Yeah.
why I did it. I stayed
Yeah.
late shift for 13 years,
Hmm.
midnight to 8, because otherwise I wouldn't see my kids.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, okay. And then I did 4 years of 7 at night till 3 in the morning, and I thought that was the best shift that ever God
Hmm.
created. You were so busy, the time just flew by. It was,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
I was in charge of that shift. I had 23 cops, and
Hmm.
almost all of them were special units.
Oh,
I
wow.
had like gang cars, I had this car, I had that car,
Yeah.
and
Huh.
they weren't taking assignments. So as a sergeant, it was just like heaven. And I'm just like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not dealing with half the BS that my other sergeants are dealing with.
Hmm.
It's very specialized, and it was a lot of fun.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you're on patrol for uh, how many years here before you were injured?
Oh, that was in '09. So I was about 4.5 years in.
Okay.
Five
So
if you count the academy.
could you tell us a little bit about how that happened or what happened?
Yeah, this was back in the day when we were actually allowed to pursue people. You can't do that now.
You
I mean,
can't?
unless no, unless it's a violent felon that we don't already know the identity of. you can't pursue for anything.
Oh, I could go into this. I mean, it depends on who the chief was for us.
Hmm.
You know, it's like it started out where it was pretty much carte blanche and the sergeant had the last word. I mean, obviously the cop could cancel their own pursuit if
Right.
they thought it was too dangerous,
Right.
or a supervisor could cancel it.
Hmm.
And it was the Wild West. Every night we were in a pursuit. Every night. It was awesome. I mean, that was
I
one of my
loved them. They
favorite
were
parts.
so much fun.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
And then a new chief came in and we got squad cameras. And I was like, ooh, this looks scary. Yeah, and you could also tell if the cop was tapping the brakes, how fast they were going, if they were wearing their
Yep.
seatbelt.
Yep.
The days of, kind of fibbing stuff over the air. Yeah, I'm going 40
Done.
miles an hour times two, I was like, all right. So then he just put this ultra restrictive pursuit policy in, and crime skyrocketed. Fatal accidents went up 450%.
Wow.
Nobody's stopping at stop signs. Nobody's
Yeah.
obeying this. There was
Yeah.
no consequence for breaking the law. Zero.
Yeah.
Because they're driving stolen cars or cars with no license plates. And it's like,
Hmm.
you can't track down whoever was driving.
No, you can't. You have to catch them.
Yes. So go ahead.
You
I'm
have to
sorry,
catch
but
them.
that's a hot button for me. It's like, oh my God. So now we're like in some murky middle that,
Yeah.
they're more than happy to fry the cop. And they could find some like way of doing it if things go wrong. So you got to be careful with that. If
Kind
there's
of like
any,
today.
yeah,
Kind of like it is today.
yes. So if there's any like newer cops or younger cops out there that are listening or watching, please, it's like pick your poison. Yes, it is fun or whatever, but if things turn bad, and it could turn bad really fast, they don't have your back anymore. Sorry.
Cops today have to be conscious of protecting themselves way
Yes.
more than we ever did.
Yes.
Um, so yeah. No, we couldn't pursue for a traffic violation. It had to be something serious.
Hmm.
We could pursue for DUIs because obviously they presented a danger to people on the road. Any kind of felony, that sort of thing. If you could
Hmm.
articulate why you needed to chase someone, we were allowed to. And they were fun, man. I love me a good
Oh,
pursuit.
oh, heck yeah.
We
So,
by general orders, we were only supposed to have three cars in the pursuit.
oh yeah.
So the lead car, then the second would be on the radio, and then if you had canine, you put them third, but there'd be like,
Sure.
10 cars,
Oh, it turned
10
into the Blues
cars
Brothers
behind.
every time. It was awesome.
Everybody was gonna get a piece.
Oh,
Like, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how long?
So
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, when did the injury happen? How did it happen?
So I saw this car one night and he did it was a minivan. And he did that thing where they're in the far right lane, and then all of a sudden the cop comes up behind and they go all the way over to make a left-hand turn. So he did that thing, but he looked like he was swerving a little bit. So I was like, all right, I got me one, got me a DUI, because my supervisor had kind of been on me. I
Mm,
hadn't been hitting it as hard as I should. So I'm like,
yeah.
all right, I'm gonna get me one tonight, get him off my back. So I pull into the turn lane behind him and I start running the tag, and it comes back stolen. He wasn't
What?
DUI, it was a stolen tag. So
Yeah.
obviously it's a stolen car, right? That's just how it is. So before we go around the turn and before I can even get on the radio, well, I called it in, and then before I could turn my lights on, he just took off. Took off.
Yeah.
So we're going down this road, and for some reason, it was about 8 o'clock at night in Northern Virginia traffic, you know, evening rush hour.
Oof.
So nobody could get to me. I mean, there's always like 16 cops in a pursuit, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's always is, but nobody could get to me. So this cat, he kept making right-hand turns. He didn't know where he was or where
Mm.
to go. So he kept making right-hand turns. We ended up on 95, driving 90 miles an hour down the shoulder. No crashes. Pretty
Okay.
proud of that. Made another right-hand turn, made another right-hand turn. And then we wound up in this little neighborhood that had one road in and one road out. There was
Mm.
only one way to get in and out.
Yeah.
He didn't know that. So we kind of went around the circle a couple times. And then he went out to a cul-de-sac, which he thought was the exit, but wasn't. Turned around, and I'm thinking he's going to bail, right? Because they always bail.
Yes.
So I'm
Eventually
tight.
they,
I'm tight in on him, right?
yep.
Well, we got into this cul-de-sac, and there's I think they call it a stovepipe. It's like another straight patch of pavement they can
Mm.
stick more houses on.
Yeah.
So he goes the end of that and he makes a U-turn. He goes in a driveway, backs up, and then now we're going like by each other, like staring at
Yeah.
each other in
Hi.
the face.
Yeah, you're waving to each other.
He goes back out, makes the loop again because he still can't find the exit. And then we end up back in that same cul-de-sac, right at the end of the cul-de-sac. So I'm still locked on. He's gonna bail.
Yep.
He's gonna bail. And I'm not fast. Like I am not a fast runner. So I was close. I was like, I'm gonna get him. But I gotta be close. But he'd already showed me that he wasn't gonna run. Hindsight's 2020.
Sure.
I should have been thinking that, but I wasn't. I was thinking he was gonna bail. So he turned into a driveway, and I'm still thinking bail. So I pull in at the textbook, you pull in at an angle and you get
Yep.
out and you challenge him over the hood. Textbook, right?
Right.
Textbook tactical position. Well, he kicks it in reverse and he backs up into another driveway. So now we're like face to face, maybe
Oh,
25, 30 feet apart, if that.
yeah.
Um, we're staring at each other like he was from Africa. I think he was from Sierra Leone. So
Okay.
he had really dark skin and these huge white eyes. And then he just gunned it.
Oof.
And I shot. My bullets didn't go through the dashboard, or they would have hit him.
Yeah.
Hollow points don't go through dashboards. It actually was poking out the odometer glass.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Had it gone through, it would have hit him.
Yeah.
But he ducked down. And so he hit me. And it was between the door and my car, and the minivan hit my door and trapped
Oh,
me between the car and the door.
ah,
I bent the A-frame, the A-pillar with my
yes.
head, like right here.
Oh, geez.
That's my claim to fame. My head dented the A-pillar. So obviously it knocked me out.
Yeah.
And I got a couple of scars that I had to have stitched up. But then he finally made it out of the cul-de-sac, and by that time people had caught up. So they
Okay.
chased him a little more, and he hit another car and took off on foot, and they got him eventually.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Once you see a cop on the ground unconscious, if you're a
oh yeah,
responding squad, now all bets are off.
yeah.
Yeah, we're getting that asshole. Yeah,
The
there's
first person that showed up to my scene was my asshole first sergeant, who I hated and he hated me, and he was the first person to show up on scene. Like even half delirious, I was like, figures is what happened.
well, it's funny, but not funny. When we had a cop that we called Windsock Bob because he was backup Bob because he never initiated anything, but he was always
Uh-huh.
there as a backup because
Yeah,
then you didn't have to write any
no
reports.
reports. Yeah.
Yep. And then we called him Windsock because one night I'm late shift for a roll call and he's in his own vehicle chasing a car. And it's like, okay,
Oh
that's
no.
stupid.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's literally going by our district station. And it's like, are you kidding me? So this guy actually pulled over for him. He's not in a police car. He's like in a pickup truck, but he's still in uniform. He was
okay.
coming home from work. And, he's like, hey, blah, blah, blah. He starts yelling at him. The guy looks at him and puts it in drive and starts taking off. Well, he reaches in there to try and get the keys out of the ignition.
Mm-mm.
And now he becomes Windsock Bob. And they're
Don't do
flopping down
that. That's
yeah, they're
bad.
very much so. So he finally lets go and he's ass over tea kettle going down the
Mhm.
road. And the first cop to back him up was a guy that his girlfriend was cheating on him with. And he looked at it and said, yeah, I bet I'm not your favorite guy to be saving the day right now, right? And he's like, no, not at all, asshole.
Never
And
fails.
yeah.
It never fails.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. So you get injured, they get the bad guy. Please tell me
yeah.
your prosecutor like nailed this person to the cross.
We had great prosecutors back in the day.
Good.
And yes, they did. He ended up pleading to a different charge, but the charge, how the statute set up, it actually had a longer prison term than
Okay.
it was attempted first degree murder
Okay.
was the initial charge of an LEO, but then he pled to another charge that was some malicious wounding charge. I can't remember exactly, but
Mm.
actually had a longer prison term. So I was
Oh,
like,
good.
okay, I'm good with
Excellent.
that.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
they were
good.
great back in the day.
Yeah, like in Milwaukee, that'd be disorderly conduct, probably a ticket. Yeah, just
Well, today
yeah,
it's just going to go to court and they're going to drop it.
yeah, pretty much. Just,
Um,
yeah.
Bad right now. The courts
Oh,
are it's bad.
yes, it is. So, how long were you laid up with that injury?
I had a pretty bad concussion, and then I had the two lacerations, one on my ear and one on my forehead that had to get
Mm,
sewn up. So it was about a month and a half
okay.
before I felt normal because the when your brain gets rattled like that, it messes you up.
Oh, I would
It's
think.
kind of weird. Um, I- my husband's going to work.
Oh,
Just
okay.
so
That's all right.
so about a month and a half.
Okay.
So
So were you married or have kids back then?
we had been married for 2 years, no kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your husband was on the same department as you?
Yeah. He was
Was
actually working that night. We were on
Oh
different
God.
squads. I was working the evening shift and he was midnights. So
Okay.
it was 8 p.m. and he was about to, their shift started at 9. So he was at the station. So he heard everything. He
Oh,
heard all the radio traffic. Yeah. I can't imagine.
oh,
But
that would suck. Oh
I
my
mean, it was
gosh.
going great at first. They let me continue the pursuit because I was
Yeah.
cool as a cucumber on the radio
Yeah.
on
Well,
purpose. I mean, I was faking
right.
everything. But no, I had control. I was doing great until the very end.
Well,
Um,
yeah, that's not your fault. Those things happen so quickly.
yeah,
It's like you try to train for almost any scenario, but then you get on the street and it's like, okay, that came out
it's
of left
always something
field.
different. It's
Yeah,
always something different.
exactly. You just do the
Hmm.
best with what you got.
Yeah.
And that would be super tough. So did you meet your husband on the job?
I went to the academy with his brother, who's now my brother-in-law, but I didn't meet him until I went to Midnights and he was working on that squad, and that's where we met. We started dating, and I never dated anybody else.
Wow.
Here we are.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, how difficult was that? Dating somebody. It's like obviously I've worked with couples that have gotten married and lots of
Hmm.
them that have gotten divorced that were
Yeah.
on the job together. I mean, how difficult was that?
At first, it was easy.
Okay.
He did his thing, I did my thing on our days off. We were off together, and it was fine. It was easy. We like to travel, so we did a lot of traveling. It was when we had our son that things
Mm,
got hard.
okay.
Because all of a sudden now you've got a schedule. You can't just you have no time. You can't just do whatever you used to do. So that's when
Right.
things really got difficult.
So did management like say anything? I mean, like some departments frown upon, cops dating each other. Some might even have rules against it, which is silly because how are you going to enforce that, really? I mean, how are you?
Yeah. There was no rule against it. In fact, for the first few months, people didn't even know we were dating. We didn't
Okay.
act like we were dating at work. Um, so, and by the time everybody found out, we've been together for so long, they're like, yeah, they're just dating.
Okay.
Like it wasn't gossip anymore.
Right.
Nobody
And
cared.
then when you get married, you have to notify HR for insurance and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There was a whole bunch of paperwork, change your name and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you guys, I'm assuming, did not work on the same shift then or anything like that.
Mm-mm, no,
Yeah. They like to
not
keep
after
that
that.
separate.
That's what we did when we met, but after that, no.
Yeah, I
So
get it. So the injury, did you have a traumatic brain injury? Did they call it that?
they did call it that. It was essentially a concussion, but that falls within that umbrella of
Okay.
TBI.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, your brain's like inside your skull and it just goes like that.
Dang.
So, and that can cause some issue. No swelling, no bleeding. So it
Okay.
wasn't severe,
Well,
but
that's good. Now, when we were talking beforehand and, getting all of our ducks in a row, you said, there was some PTSD and you didn't even realize it. How did that come to fruition? How did you discover that?
well, the first couple of months after I was injured, I was like, yeah, I'm a real cop now. Like I got my red badge of courage. I was like, yeah, let's go get them. So, I was kind of refreshed for the job.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was that made me not connect the two, but two
Okay.
months later, I like my personality changed. I would get really, really just I don't even know how to I don't really know how to explain it, but it felt like I was going to blow up. So,
Hmm.
I was throwing stuff across the room. I was breaking things, which is not my personality at all. It never has been. But I never connected the two. Never did.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was because PTSD was kind of a new thing back then. They were
Yeah.
just starting to look at it with combat vets and that kind of thing. So it wasn't really on the radar. Then I had that, decent 2 months, and then it just kind of it set in. So I didn't really connect the two. But I went for several years being an alcoholic, just to kind of numb everything.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I was like, you know what, that's probably what that was.
Okay.
So I finally sought some help,
Okay.
and it's been getting much better.
So this was
So
like a self-realization of, yeah, something ain't right. This is not
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Like you said, maybe too much drinking or self-medicating to
Hmm.
kind of mask it, which I've
Oh yeah,
heard a zillion times over, and
oh
I've
yeah.
done it myself.
But we can't do drugs, so we do alcohol.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's the legal drug we could do,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
that's,
it's a broken record. But
it
yeah,
is.
it's very true.
Well, I'm glad you were brave enough to get some help because a lot of cops just go down the tubes. It's so sad to see.
Well, I wasn't for a long time. I put it off for a long time,
Yeah.
because it felt like if I went to get help, then I couldn't deal with it. Like I was weak, and
Hmm.
I'm supposed to be the strong one, right?
Right.
Like, especially as a woman, I'm like, I gotta be tough. Like, I gotta be tough. And it felt like asking for help was not tough, which is complete, it's a complete fallacy. And I
It
see
is.
that now. But yeah, I mean, I fell into that trap for a while, and it held me down for a while too.
But
Finally,
you,
things just got so bad. You're like, well, I got to do something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a self-realization, and you're like, okay,
Oh
time
yeah.
to take care of this, and you
Yeah.
did. So good on
Yeah.
you. I'm glad. So reading through some of the stuff that you sent me, you said that writing kind of helped you through that part of your life. Could you kind of explain that?
Yeah. Even before I realized that it was PTSD, what I noticed was that these thoughts they would just dam up in my mind, and
Hmm.
they build and they build, all the what ifs. What
Right.
if this? What if it hadn't been raining that night? What if would I be dead? All that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And it just stayed. It had nowhere to go. So I, uh, I went to work out one night, and I had my iPod Touch.
Yeah.
That's how long ago
Uh,
this.
I had one of those too.
So I did my little weight workout, and I got on the treadmill, and it was starting to happen again. Like I could feel it,
Mm.
just it felt like pressure.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe I pulled open the notes app on my iPod Touch, and I just started kind of typing in
Yeah.
a scenario as fiction. And I stayed on that treadmill for 2 hours,
Holy
which
cow.
had never happened before and hasn't happened since. So, and at the end of it, it felt like you're exhausted, but a good exhausted,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was like, wow, okay. And then from there, I just kept on going.
Great. Well, we're
So,
gonna talk a little more about writing later, but I want to know when you got your how and when you got your appetite for forensic work, doing the CSI stuff.
well, the same year of my incident, as one does when you face that kind of situation, I kind of took stock of my life,
Hmm.
and I didn't have any specialties. I wasn't on any of the part-time teams or anything like that. So I needed to start branching out. And what I'd realized working patrol is that I loved being on a scene where there was a dead body. I know that is such a counterintuitive thing, and it sounds bad.
It's
It's
not.
interesting.
It's
It's
interesting.
interesting.
We're cops, and it's like that's the ultimate crime. If you go to a homicide, nothing trumps that. Nothing is
Yeah.
more serious. Nothing
Yep.
is, it's like somebody's life has ended. We're not celebrating the fact that somebody's dead. We're excited because we could be cops.
Yeah.
We're not pulling over drunks. We're not pulling over a speeder. It's like, okay.
Working rear end accidents. I hated rear end accidents. I got so mad. Everybody
Well,
got a ticket.
we
But yeah,
were,
when you're on a scene like that,
yeah,
you feel the gravity of it. It feels
absolutely.
important.
And you
Yeah.
want to do a good job for the
Hmm.
family. There's,
Yeah.
and the victim, no matter who this person is,
Yeah.
because most of the time it's really easy to get jaded because
Oh
most of
yeah.
your victims are criminals.
Victims is how
Yeah,
we say
yes.
it. We do it with air quotes.
We would always laugh and it's like, God help us if
Hmm.
we run into a real victim tonight. It's like it didn't happen, but you had to. you had to take a step back and say, you know what, this is somebody's brother, sister, mom,
Hmm.
whatever, somebody out
Yep.
there loves them or loved them at one point in time, and
Yep.
you owe it to them to do a good job and ultimately
Hmm.
find out who did this and bring them to justice.
Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of when I noticed it. So I was like, all right, I'll be we had a part-time unit called crime scene technicians. And it
Okay.
was a 2-week school that you went to and you learned how to use your camera and some of the basics of crime scene investigation. And then I did that for the next 3 or 4 years and I loved it.
Okay.
Absolutely loved it. The only problem was getting on the full-time unit where I am now. People get in that unit and they retire out of it. Nobody
Absolutely.
leaves, right?
Right.
Because
Yep.
it's a pretty good gig. So
Yep.
nobody leaves. So I had to kind of wait that out until a bunch of people retired at one time, and I finally made it into the unit full time.
Excellent.
So
So you make it into the unit full time. What kind of training did you receive?
it was another. The biggest part of it was another FTO period. I was
Okay.
assigned to an experienced CSI, and I would work cases, and he would watch me do my work.
Mm,
I kind of knew how to do it from being a crime scene technician,
yeah.
but this is leveling up. So he kind of monitored me while I did it for 6 months to make sure I
Oh,
had mastered,
yes.
you know, the techniques.
Interesting.
So,
So, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions regarding CSI work? You see on TVs and movies, that kind of thing.
you know, I can't watch them anymore. I used to love CSI, lost the original CSI.
Yes.
Now I yell at the TV and I get mad and I can't watch them. But that said, they actually do a really good job, I think, of showing modern techniques and modern technology and the scientific advances in
Hmm.
forensics. I actually think they're really good at that. Um, well, there's two big misconceptions that I see. And one is that when you leave a crime scene, that you're pretty, like your clothes are awesome, your hair's perfect. You're on a scene for at least 10 hours. When you leave, your shirt's untucked, your hair's like sticking out. You probably have to pee. It's just a mess. So that's the biggest one. The other is that everything happens so fast. I mean, obviously it has to. Show's got to be
Right.
over in an hour. You got to figure out
Yes.
who did it in an hour. But when I wrote my crime novel, I tried to use the fact that everything is slow to weave it into the story. When you
Sure.
send something to the lab, it's going to take a while to get it back, even if you rush it. So there's a lot that can be done in fiction in that time. A lot of misconceptions. You can throw in red herrings. So I
Yeah.
tried to use that in my novel to help push the story along,
Mm, okay.
and reveal things when I wanted to reveal them.
Now, again, I talk to law enforcement, state, federal, whatever, from all over the world, and it
Mhm.
always amazes me on how they go through a crime scene where, like, where I worked in Milwaukee, you would have a small army of homicide detectives. We had a homicide
Mhm.
unit that was 24/7.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you would have a lieutenant or a sergeant from homicide if it was at night. If it was during the day, the captain actually might show up.
Oh, wow.
And you would have one CSI person.
Hmm.
And we would have like 5 or 6 detectives
Wow.
along with everybody else, and I talked to other departments and it's like you might have 1 or 2 detectives and a small army of CSI people. You'd have like 3 or 4 CSI people
Mhm.
processing the scene. What was it like by you?
We work in pairs. So one of us will take primary and the other will do a sketch, or they'll do kind of some of the involved but lesser important work.
Okay.
Whereas one person will be responsible for actually picking up the evidence, keeping it in our name and keeping it secure.
So you
So we're
recover the evidence.
primary. Yeah. I
Yes,
mean,
you.
we still, there's lots of detectives and supervisors around,
Hmm.
but for us, there's two of us and a supervisor.
So
Typically,
how
if it's a big
many,
scene, if it's a big scene, we'll all go.
if it's a, just say like a run of the mill homicide, like T-Bone killed Boo on the sidewalk,
Yep. Yep.
how many detectives are going to show up for that?
On the scene, probably one, and it
Okay.
probably won't be the actual case agent. We call them a scene detective, and they're kind of a liaison.
Oh,
between
okay.
CID. So if CID has a question about the evidence, or is there a certain kind of evidence, they'll call the scene detective and
Yeah.
they'll ask and kind of
That's why it's so important for people who are writing novels. If you're going to be area specific, you should know that stuff. It's like if you have one detective show up when usually there's like 6 or 7 that show up, that's a huge inconsistency.
it is, but it also varies so widely from department to
It
department.
does. It really
So
does.
if you kind of just respect the size of it, if you're writing about a large department, things are going to be different than if
Yeah.
it's a sheriff in a town that doesn't have a traffic light, right? So he may
Right.
do everything.
Right.
So as long as you kind of get it in the ballpark for the size of whoever your character works for,
Sure.
you actually have, I think it gives you some leeway.
Sure.
Um,
So, when do you think it's appropriate to kind of distort reality to fit the story? Like you said, nobody's going to read a book where they're processing a crime scene for 10 hours. It's like, okay,
right.
that's 500 pages of doing that.
um, I think, well, obviously some of it's very boring.
Right.
I mean, my job is one of the interesting in the world, but some of it's repetitive and it's boring, and anything like that you have to leave out. You may focus in on a couple items of evidence instead of the 60 other things that are, you
Right.
end up picking up. Nobody wants to hear about that, right? So you kind of have to cut to the chase with some
Mm.
of it, because a lot of it is repetitive and boring. And that's okay. Like, you need to do that for your readers. Your readers don't want to, hear about you putting something on a sketch. Like nobody cares.
Then I had the wheel thingy that I measured,
Yeah.
the couch to the chair, and it's like, yeah, it's time to snore.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, when
Well, and
CSI,
you
go
have to
ahead.
remember too that most people reading your books, they don't know anything about crime scene work. So
True.
if you're even just a little more than average educated on it, you're going to do just fine.
I think so
Most
too.
people have no idea. So
Right.
just make it
Well,
sound good.
it's funny
Good to
when,
go.
the CSI started coming out on TV, people loved it. And then we started having a problem. We call it the CSI effect for
Yep.
jurors,
Yep.
and it made it tough on prosecutors to prove their cases.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, our old CA, um, you know, they don't know anything about forensics either. Usually, most prosecutors don't, unless they take the time to learn.
Mm,
And then most defense attorneys, they don't know either. So,
no, they don't.
like, they don't really know that much.
Mm,
But our Commonwealth attorney, the prosecutor, used to be really good about pulling us in and saying, okay, you collected this. Tell me about it. Tell me why it was important. Tell me why this lab result is important. And they would actually take the time to talk about pertinent pieces of information.
yeah.
These days, I mean, they can't prosecute a case on any level, so it really doesn't matter. But from a jury standpoint, I've really never had that much of an issue.
Okay.
Um, there were issues, but it was usually about something that wasn't CSI related,
Mm,
that just kind of overshadowed everything.
okay.
But what I found is that if you just start throwing out some jargon, some scientific terms, nobody asks any follow-up questions. Everybody's impressed, and you get no follow-up,
Okay.
cross-examination questions.
Because you must spend a lot of time in court. People don't realize, like the CSI techs, that they do get subpoenaed, and and it's the job of the defense attorney to discredit you.
Yeah. Well, and you also have preliminary hearings. You have,
Right.
the court date will be set, and then it's continued, and then it's continued again.
Oh,
I have
yes.
court scheduled this year every month from March to September.
Oh, yuck.
Trials, like a full week trial. Whether or not they happen, who
Right. Most of
knows?
them don't, but
Yeah.
you can't blow it off. You have to go.
Mhm.
Otherwise,
Right.
then that one time that it will go, now you're in
Oh
deep
no, we
doo
have to
doo.
be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Absolutely.
physical evidence is such an important part of a case now.
Sure.
With the scientific advances, what we do, that's kind of the linchpin in the investigation. There's a
Gotcha.
lot of other aspects, but the physical evidence, if your latent print is there, then you got some splaining to do.
Yep.
So it's hard evidence.
Right, right.
So
Now, it seems like there has been a trend within the last maybe 10 years, 15 years of having civilians being the CSI
Mhm.
techs with police departments and not having sworn police officers that could be out taking assignments. You're already short. I think that's kind of the mentality is like, you're a sworn police officer. Why do we need you doing this? We should have a
Mhm.
civilian.
Mhm.
What does that look like in your department?
Virginia, for the most part, is mostly sworn.
Okay.
In any department that's big enough to have a dedicated CSI unit. There's a couple of exceptions. I think Richmond City and Chesterfield, which is south, and then that's pretty much it. I think most other places everybody's sworn in
Okay.
Virginia. Now, if you go to
Yeah.
Florida, they're almost all civilian.
Right.
You go to certain, it kind of follows a state trend.
Hmm.
So I think whatever the state kind of moves toward is what every department tends to gravitate towards. In my department or in my unit, we're hybrid. So we have 8 people and 2 of them are civilian.
How's
So
that working out?
actually I think it works out really good.
Okay.
Well, one of them is a 20, he graduated. He retired at 26 or 27 years
Hmm.
as an officer. And then 25 of that was as a CSI for that
Oh, okay.
department.
Sure,
so,
sure.
so he's just, it's his retirement gig. But the other one is, she's a, college educated. She's got a master's degree, but they bring in a different set of knowledge. In
Mm,
college, you major in biology, you know more about labs,
sure.
actual lab work, which
Yeah.
we do. We do fingerprint processing, so there's chemicals and all that kind of stuff. But it's just a little extra knowledge
Hmm.
padded on top, and then you bring your knowledge as a police officer. I think it actually is very effective.
A good friend of mine works for Las Vegas Metro. He
Mm.
was a Milwaukee copper, and him and his fiance, now wife, hated the winters so much. It's like, yeah, we're going to Vegas, and it's like, cool.
Oh, yeah.
He's been there for a long time, but they transitioned over to civilians, and he said it was the best thing they ever did. He said, "Oh my God, it's all a bunch of college kids
Hmm.
that are literally excited to go to a crime scene." He said the salty vets were kind of like, another crime scene. All right. These kids are like, oh, this is awesome. Oh, cool. Let
Yeah.
me dig right in. It was a different mentality.
The only the only real disadvantage I see to it, and this is something we've experienced in my unit, is that civilians don't hang around that long.
Mm,
They'll come and work for 2 or 3 years and then they kind of move on to something else, especially if there's no room to promote
sure.
within the unit, which
Yeah.
there really isn't for civilians in ours. So it was difficult to retain civilians for any length of time,
Oh,
whereas
okay.
cops are going to stay till they retire.
You're right.
So they get
Right.
all the experience. So that's really the one hiccup that I've personally been privy to. But I mean, civilians do a great job. I can't,
Yeah.
our 2 civilians are great.
Now our with our department, it's hybrid as well.
Mhm.
And they were threatening for like, God, more than 10 years. Yeah, we're going to replace all of you with civilians, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. It never happened. It never happened. Then all of a sudden they hired like, I think 2 or 3
Wow.
civilians. And the sergeant that was in charge of that unit retired and they replaced him with a civilian.
Oh, wow.
So they have a civilian supervisor. And
And they're still
literally,
sworn?
no.
Oh, there's no sworn at all.
Oh,
Okay.
no, no, there is. I'm sorry. There is, but what
Okay.
happened was they threatened all of them. It's like, you're all going back to the street.
Yeah.
And our
Which
CSI
nobody wants
department,
to do.
yeah, exactly. And the wailing and mashing of teeth began, and this injury and that injury and this heartburn and whatever.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what happened was, there was this huge upheaval, and then I don't know how they settled it, but they settled it. And it's like, yeah, this should be
Mhm.
done through attrition. When somebody
Yeah.
retires or
Yeah.
goes to a different unit or whatever, then okay, then you replace them with a civilian
Yeah.
instead of sworn. You just don't uproot somebody that's been doing this for 20 years.
Ooh, you certainly don't do it to old cops, man.
No,
They
that's
they
oh yeah.
they have zero F's left to give,
Yes,
so they will let you know.
yes, exactly. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to be the sergeant supervising them when they went
Uh-uh.
back to the street. That would just
Nope.
not work well.
Mm-mm.
But
That's funny. Same everywhere. I swear it's the same
It
everywhere.
is. No matter who I talk to, around the globe, cops are gonna be cops. There's a lot of consistency there,
Yeah.
which is funny, I think. But
That's funny.
let's talk about writing. When did the writing bug bite you?
I think it was on the treadmill.
Okay.
And it wasn't at the time, it wasn't so much a bug as a coping mechanism, but as I
Hmm.
kept doing it, I was like, this is really cool. You write a crappy first draft, and it's terrible, and you're like, I'll never be able to do this. But then you make it better and you rewrite it, and you're like, wow, maybe I can do this. This is not half bad. So it was kind of a effect where the more I kept doing it, the more I
Hmm.
loved it. I love seeing the finished product, and seeing where it came from to what it became. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how it progressed.
Okay. Now, nonfiction, fiction, both. What do you like writing? What have you
Mostly
written?
mostly fiction. I have
Okay.
a thriller series, and then this is the first in my crime novel series. But I also have it's a reference book for writing crime scenes.
Oh,
So
okay.
I kind of put that together based on what we teach. We teach the crime scene technicians,
Hmm.
and it kind of goes over roles at the scene and some of the technology, and I put in parts where you can use it to create drama, just as a pro tip kind of thing.
Sure, sure. No,
So
that's cool. And that's something that's very useful for writers. We
mhm.
are talking to earlier, it's like, okay, you know, you're gonna know a little more than the average bear after,
Yeah,
reading one of your books, and it's just gonna give you a little more oomph and a little more credibility. So
yeah.
that's awesome.
I honestly didn't know how much demand there was for that, but I figured, I could give it to somebody as a business card if I needed to
Yep,
in the
absolutely.
future. Make me look
Absolutely.
good.
Well, that's like my cops and writers books.
Hmm.
I wrote those for
Yeah,
writers,
yeah.
and I had zero inclination of doing that until I
Hmm.
was going to writers conferences, and they're like, "Oh, you're that cop guy," and I was like, "I'm
Yeah.
not wearing a t-shirt or a banner, or a sandwich board." And they just start asking you the questions, and it's like, then somebody that knows a lot more than I do about writing, they're like, "You should really write, a couple
Hmm.
books." And I'm like, "All right," and sure enough, I
Yeah,
mean, they're consistently selling every month.
really
Yeah, so
good.
but I also have the podcast. I have the Facebook group.
Right.
I've done stuff to support that. And
Correct.
then
Yeah. I
and then
haven't
when you
really started marketing much. I'm pretty slow putting books out
okay.
because I only have maybe an hour a day. I just got to squeeze it in wherever.
Yes, I
Um,
do remember
so
those
so
days.
my,
Yes.
right, my backlist isn't that big, so I'm not going to waste a bunch of money on marketing
Sure.
until it gets a little bigger.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So are you self-published, or are you pitching for like an agent publisher?
oh no, I have no desire to get an agent. I'm self-published.
Okay.
Back
Where
in the day, I was like, well, I won't really be a real author unless I get an agent and I sell my book. And then, I started learning more about the industry, and I realized that is not the case. That
no.
is absolutely not the case. Um, so yeah, I'm indie and always will be.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses, pros and cons.
Sure.
And for the normal person like me and you, it's unless you're Stephen King, your publisher isn't going to do a whole lot for you.
You will get zero marketing budget.
Yeah, and you're going to
Yeah.
get 30% of the
Yep.
royalties, and if you self-publish, you get 70%.
Hmm. Well, and if you're with one of the big houses, you're still going to have to do your newsletter. You're still going to have
Oh,
to, do socials. You're going to have to build your audience and
yes.
connect with them. So I figured if I'm going to have to do that anyway, I'll get 70% instead of
Yes.
the, 15 to 20, 30%. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
So what does a writing day look like for you? Just whenever you can fit it in?
I don't actually have a writing day. I write when I
Okay.
can.
Okay. So, I mean, some people wake up at the ass crack of morning and
I can't
hit it, or
function that early in the morning.
okay.
Um, well, the way my job is, we're either really busy or we don't have anything to do. It's feast
Sure.
or famine in my unit. So, there are some times I'll get to pull up instead of YouTubing like everybody else does. I'll just pull up a Google Doc and work on a chapter.
Sure.
So that helps. And then at night, if I'm not too tired, I put the kid to bed and I'll write a bit. So
Okay.
I would
So
love to
where
have writing days. That's the ultimate goal.
yes.
But right now, just do what you got to do.
That's exactly right. So how much of your work experience goes into your books?
The first two, my Luke Marshall thriller system series, not that much, a
Okay.
little bit. I actually had a scene in the first book that was a crime scene that I put some stuff into, but everything else was very little. This the new book, the Ellery Holt thriller series, the first one's called Perry Mortem. It's all experience. It's
Okay.
just snippets that I took and I rearranged them and put them within the plot. It's pretty
Okay.
much all experience.
Cool. So while we're on the topic of your latest book, Perry Mortem,
Hmm.
which first off, I had to Google it. I didn't know what Perry Mortem was.
Yeah.
That's an injury, usually a bone injury that happens right before death. Is that
Right before, yeah, or during death. Yeah.
okay?
So,
So,
so the tagline is the answers lie between life and death. So
okay.
that kind of ties into that. It's that time right around death is
Could
what the term refers to.
could you give us a brief synopsis of the book?
Yeah, it's there's a young woman found murdered, and she's found in a creek, and the main character is actually dual POV. So my main
Okay.
character is the crime scene investigator that works the case, and then she also has a partner who's the lead detective. Obviously there's tension, but as she starts to investigate this case, she has her own backstory, and this one's it's very similar. So
Hmm.
this one's kind of personal. So she kind of just follows the clues. Like I said, I try to take my time with
Yeah.
the lab results. So she's off doing something else, maybe barking up the wrong tree. And then ultimately she has to find the killer before he comes after her.
Okay. Very good. So you plan, it's book one, so you plan on making this series.
Yes.
Cool. How many books, or do you know yet?
I haven't decided.
Okay.
I have the next two at least planned. So I figure five, six, seven, eight. We'll see how much material I have.
Excellent. Excellent. So I always like to ask the coppers on the show, if they have any like funny, maybe heartwarming, maybe not, stories from the job that they like to share. Do you have anything like that?
Well, you said no topic was off
Yep,
base, so I have a poop
absolutely.
story.
Sure, why not?
I, I was actually just cleared roll call, and I was leaving the station, and this disorderly domestic comes out on the road that goes in front of the station. So I'm pulling out. I'm like, all right, I'll take care of it. So we get out, and this guy who's somebody's roommate, and he was in the car for some reason getting a ride, and people in the car were like, I don't want him back in my car. He was being an a-hole, complete ass. He wasn't drunk, he was just being an asshole. So we tried to get him to walk away. I was like, sir, you need to walk away. Well, I told him 7 or 8 times, and I had a backup there, and we were like, you just need to leave. You're not under arrest. You haven't done anything
Right.
wrong. Just leave. You can't get back in the car. They don't want you in there. So he finally turned to go, but under his breath, I hear him say, okay, bitch. And I was like, you know what? I think you're going to jail for disorderly.
Yeah, but that's a trigger. Yes.
Yeah, well, I already gave him like 9 chances,
Yeah,
bro.
that's
Like,
that's
walk
that's
away.
that's eight too many, but okay.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So we go hands on. This guy didn't want to go to jail. Did not want to go to jail. So we end up fighting him on this little grassy knoll area out beside the station. And it's me, and my backup is big. He's like 6'5", just big dude. Um, Wrestling with this guy, and he was strong.
Mm,
He wasn't that big of a dude, but he was strong. So we got him on his belly, and we were trying to get his hands behind his back, and then he flipped over somehow, and he was on his back, and we were kneeling on his stomach, and all of a sudden I started smelling poop. I'm like, great. We're rolling around in dog shit out here, right?
Oh yeah,
That's what
been
I was
there,
thinking.
been there.
Um, but then we get him in cuffs, and I look down, and it's smeared down the front of him. It's smeared
Oh,
down me, and it's smeared down my partner.
oh,
And at that exact moment, this other officer, she comes running across, and she's like, he has AIDS. He has AIDS.
oh
Well, he
no.
had a colostomy bag, and it got
Oh,
popped while we were wrestling, covered.
oh,
We were all covered. So we took him in the garage and like hosed him down and put a jumpsuit on him. And I let my partner go home because he had more shit on him than I did, and
Oh,
it was my arrest. So he went home and showered and changed, and I had to sit in lockup smelling all of this. And the
oh,
worst part was that so colostomy bag ports, they don't have there's not a single size or fitting.
oh,
There's a lot of different fittings. So
yeah.
rescue doesn't carry them
So,
because they
right,
don't know what
yeah.
kind he has. So we're sitting in lockup and I keep hearing this farting noise. And every time it happens, there's another guy in there. He's like, dude, he's like yelling at this guy. But it
Oh,
was it was the colostomy bag hole or
oh,
the port that was farting. I mean, it took like 3 hours to get the paperwork done. I tried to wipe everything off of me, but it's still, I have a pretty
oh,
strong stomach, but that was one of the few times I almost threw up.
oh, yes.
So
Oh,
anyway, we rigged something with some paper towels and string, and it was cold. It was like January. I drove him to the jail. All the windows were down.
oh,
And then fortunately, my house was on the way back to the station. So I stopped and I stripped in the garage and
oh,
like took a scalding hot shower.
oh,
That was that was probably the grossest thing I've ever done.
oh, that's just so, and then you're like, why didn't you just walk away? Oh, God. And I'm guessing he had the colostomy bag because he was shot at one point
He
in time.
was. He was shot at one
Yep.
point.
Yep.
Yep.
That's
Yes, he
almost
was.
everybody. I never thought we'd be
Mhm.
talking about colostomy
Right?
bags, but it's like somebody, especially in the neighborhoods where I worked, if they had a colostomy bag, it's like, okay, this is gunfire related. And they're like,
He was.
yeah,
It had been a while back too, because he was
yep.
older. He was in his 50s.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
never had to do that, but we were approaching a guy on a porch. He was wanted for God knows what. We got our guns out and it's like, all right, it's time for you to go to jail, dude. Blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
He lifts up his shirt, takes the colostomy bag off, and he started flinging poop at us. And I'm like, do I
That
shoot
might be
him?
worse.
What do I do with this? It's like, this is like a biohazard. I don't know if he's got hepatitis, if he's got AIDS, if he's
They
got
don't teach you that in the academy.
no, it's like,
Like,
okay, I don't have a shield. Yeah, I don't have a poop shield to deal with this. Yeah, you're just like, ew.
uh,
We did convince him to put his bag back on. I think it was because it's like, yeah, we're just gonna shoot you, dude. It's like, no, this is not cool. This is not okay. So,
I think people would be shocked at the number of times you run across poop in the job.
oh,
It was constant. I mean, I didn't always have it smeared on me, but it was always, the drunk at 7-Eleven,
yeah.
something would roll out his pants and it would be a log. And like it was just all the time, just
Well, we,
constant poop.
so my partner and I are getting breakfast. We're working midnight to 8. We're in the McDonald's drive-through and it's way out of our area. We're both starving. We're just like, we haven't eaten like, I don't know for how long. And it was just one of those times where my kid was super crabby. I was up with him before I went to work.
Mhm.
He's just a little tyke, and it's like he wouldn't
Yeah.
go down for a nap. I went more than 24 hours without sleep.
Uh-huh.
And my partner, same, he was in the same boat. We're both just super tired, crabby. It's like I just want a fucking breakfast burrito. That's all I want, man. Yeah, it's like so we sneak over to the other side of town and then yeah, 50 take the auto theft in progress and we're like, okay, fine. So we get our food, we start scooting that way. A couple more cops beat us to our own assignment, which you never
Mhm.
want to happen.
Yeah.
And one was this female cop. She was probably about close to 6 foot.
Oh wow.
And she worked out every day. Every time I was in the gym, she was in the gym. And
Amazon.
yeah, oh, she was a big girl. And she was the sweetest girl ever.
Hmm.
But you didn't want to get on her bad side.
Oh no.
Yeah, she
No.
she could bench probably as much as I could. And
I love it.
she there's two kids were under a car. They're hiding from the police and were literally able to get under a car. That's hard to
Hmm.
do. She
Yeah.
draws down on, I don't know what she said, but one completely pooped his pants just out of fear. And I'm like, okay. So we
Now
get
you have to
there
search
and
them.
yeah, and she's like, you're not gonna like me. And I'm like, oh, Shirley, why? Why, Shirley? And it's like, all right. So we had two in custody. And back then we actually had an auto theft division in our
Oh.
detective bureau. We don't
Uh-huh.
anymore. They,
Hmm.
I think they gave up. They were, it was a white flag. It's like, yeah, it's too much. But this kid was telling this detective he gave up like over 20 cars that he stole that night,
Wow.
him and his little crew. And, we had to took him out in the garage, you washed him off, gave him a paper, like jumpsuit, and he still smelled like poop. And the
Oh
detective
yeah.
was like, I hate you guys. I hate you guys. Because he's showing this detective where all these cars are that he stole.
Probably in an enclosed interview room
Oh,
where everything
uh-huh.
just
Yes,
it just
it just
stays.
percolates. It's like, oh man, so nasty.
Oh, people
Yeah.
have no idea.
No, no.
So much poop.
Yeah, so
More poop
gross.
than blood, to be honest. Until I got to this unit, it was way more poop than blood. Way more. Now it's more blood, but
That and vomit. I don't want to
yeah,
gross out too many people, but yeah, there's always the vomit story now,
it's
isn't
just
there?
part of being a cop.
Yep. Washing
Yeah.
out the back of the squad. When you're the rookie, there's your hose, there's the mop. We have at her, it's like great.
We had hardback seats, but we still had
Yep.
carpet
Oh,
in
who
the
thought that
prisoner
was a good
compartment.
idea?
Yep. Yep. You
Oh,
could clean and clean and clean, but your car would smell. Yeah. God forbid if it was summer.
oh
God
yeah.
forbid. Like, yeah. I think they've since gone to the
Yeah,
rubber
we
floors you can just hose out, but no, we
yeah,
had
we had
carpet back then.
plastic, like hard plastic. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just
The
oh
seat was just not the
yeah.
floorboard.
Oh, is that gross? Oh, God, that's nasty. All
It's,
right, we have some Facebook questions
oh,
uh
okay.
that we have in the Cops and Writers Facebook group. So let's take a peek at that. All right. Oh, Nathan Bush asks, have you ever written a book about how the real CSI works? As a matter of fact, she has. What's the name of your book, by the way?
Perry Mortem looks like
No,
this. It's on
no,
Amazon.
the CSI book, the nonfiction that you
Oh,
wrote,
it's called Write Like a CSI, a
right? Like
reference
it's
for crime writers, I think is the subtitle.
okay. Now,
It's on Amazon.
are all of your books in your you have a website, correct?
Yeah, rjstrongbooks.com.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is there links to all of your books in your website?
So I don't actually think there is a link to that book. I
Okay.
probably should put one. I don't advertise it a lot because I don't want the average person to get a hold of it. It's for writers.
Well,
Not that you can buy it and get away with perfect
yeah.
crime.
Well,
But
tell
it's
you,
if you look me up on Amazon, it's under my also.
I will put a link in the show notes to that.
Okay.
So excellent.
I should probably do that.
What are the top 10 things you see wrong in CSI? Christopher Kratchman is asking.
Top 10. Okay, so first was the looking pretty thing. Doesn't happen.
Right?
Um, two is everything happens so fast. I mean, I get it. I understand why it does, but it takes forever to get anything done. Three, wow, 10 is a lot.
It is
Um,
as many as you can think
I'll give you
off
three
the
or
top of your
four.
head. Yeah.
The other is everyone's so close. They always have the lab right there in the office. But in real life, everything is very separated. Our
Right.
lab is run by the state.
Right. Same with
So
us. Yeah.
they have their stuff, and then you have with it, even within our department, you have the detectives, and sometimes they talk to us and sometimes they don't. And there's us, and then there's what patrol did on the scene. So it's very fragmented.
Sure.
You have to bring everything together. Right there, it's like, exactly who you need to talk to is right next to you. It
Right.
doesn't happen. Um, Honestly, that's about it.
Okay.
They on the shows they'll joke around on the scene, and that's what we do, especially after we've been there for a while and we're kind of delirious.
Yes,
We just
exactly.
start making all kinds of inappropriate gallows
Oh,
humor
yes.
jokes.
Well, it's a coping mechanism. It really
Yeah.
is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Um,
and there are certain scenes where you do not joke around.
oh no,
You know,
absolutely not.
anything
Um,
dealing with kids or old people or something like really heartbreaking, you don't make fun of that at all.
yeah. The kids are hard.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, if anything, those shows they can have more humor because that's just how we deal with it. So
sure, sure.
yeah.
The only thing I could think of is it's pretty hard to get a fingerprint off of a rock. Yeah,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
of the stuff you see
That
on
would be
TV.
the other thing. You're right.
Yes, it's like, hey, look, I got a perfect fingerprint off it. And I'm like, What? No,
or a
you didn't.
chenille sweater. That's usually where I start yelling at the TV. I just can't do it.
Okay.
Although there is a new, my coworker yesterday actually went up to the neighboring jurisdiction's crime scene unit, and there is a new, it's a metal type processor for latent prints, and
Okay.
they got a latent print off a piece of cotton.
Wow.
It was
That's amazing.
unbelievable. I mean, it's
Yeah.
brand new cutting edge technology. I think
Dang.
they're the only people that have it in the state, but it was kind of amazing.
Yeah, that is
So
amazing.
yeah,
So
just by the
Biba
by.
Biba Pierce asks, what's the most intriguing case you've ever worked on?
Hi, Baba. I actually talked to her a couple times.
Okay.
Intriguing. Um, I think, for the most part, there's so many similarities in all of these cases, but there was one case, I don't know if it was intriguing, but it's the case that I'm most proud of. There's a lot of egos in a police department.
What? No
You know,
way. I don't believe it. No way.
egos everywhere, right?
Yes, there
And it
is.
always causes an issue. We work through it, but somebody ends off pissed off at somebody else. But there was this young girl, she was 11, and she got snatched off the road while she was
Wow.
walking to the school bus. And it was a stranger. It was a stranger kidnapping, which thank God are kind of rare, but it was
Very rare.
terrifying. I
Yeah.
mean, it was terrifying to all of us.
Sure.
So he was dragging her down the sidewalk, and there was another adult woman that saw her and tried
Yeah.
to help her.
Yeah.
So this guy grabs her and the little girl and takes her inside the adult woman's house, threatens her, eventually leaves the adult woman, takes the little girl and the cell phone of the woman so she can't call anybody. And then he takes the little girl down the hall, down the block, throws the woman's cell phone in a bush, and then continues down a couple other streets, and he ends up raping the little girl behind a
Oh my
shed.
God.
It was horrible. It was
Yeah.
awful. But we got there and we heard the woman's cell phone ringing, and we got that. I was primary actually on
Yeah.
this case. And we had our brand new, it's a FSIS, it's a full spectrum camera. So we
Mm.
can see UV and IR, and it's great for getting fingerprints.
Oh, wow.
So we got that thing collected. Some of my coworkers took it back, and we had this guy ID'd in 2 hours,
Holy
and we had him
God.
picked up in 7.
That's
And there were
unbelievable.
no egos. The biggest ego in the
Wow.
department was on scene with me, and I didn't see any of it. Like, everyone just did their job. They were
Yeah.
focused, no egos at all. So it went from terrifying to, we got this guy off the street because
Wow.
he couldn't stay in the public.
Do you know what the disposition of the case was? Like what he got as far as time goes or what he was
He had
convicted of?
some pretty serious mental issues. I don't
Ugh.
know the exact disposition,
Yeah.
but I suspect he is probably in a secure mental facility.
Let's hope.
That
Oh
was
God.
that 2000, it's 2018. So yeah, it's probably concluded.
God,
But
it's
it
terrible.
was probably the worst case, not the
Yeah.
worst, but one of the worst. And but it was the one I was most proud of
Yeah.
because everybody, it was just a well-oiled machine, and
As
everybody
that's
stayed
awesome.
in their lane, and it got done.
I love
Nobody
hearing
was
stories.
arguing over stupid shit.
Right. I love hearing stories like that. That's
Yeah.
great. So Richard Rebecca, my favorite Chicago PD guy. Can Ms. Strong address how CSI has changed in the wake of the O.J. Simpson case? It's been many years since the incident, but at least for us old timers, that case was a watershed moment for CSI investigators and detectives throughout the country.
Yeah, I was 13 when that happened.
You're
So
just
I
a
don't
puppet,
remember a
weren't
whole
you?
lot. uh, the Actually, the civilians that came in that went through college, they all study that case. They all study the case. And my biggest takeaway from that is documentation.
Sure.
We double and triple and quadruple document everything. Um, so that, yeah. And then these days, transparency is a big thing. So,
Right.
everything gets seen
Yeah,
and documented.
the whole OJ thing, I was just getting on the job
Mhm,
after everything was concluded.
mhm.
So it did change everything,
Oh,
and
it did.
it,
Yeah.
if you look at the trial, OJ wasn't on trial, the LAPD was on trial.
Mhm,
It flipped from, OJ as the defendant to now the LAPD is the defendant.
As well, they should have been, from what I understand.
Yeah, there was
Some
some,
shady, some shady things.
yeah,
Very
that, yeah,
shady.
that's, he literally got away with murder, but, he did get found guilty in the civil trial. So,
I mean, police got to play by the rules.
yep,
I
there's
mean,
no,
most of us are fanatical about, upholding the Constitution.
absolutely.
But, every now and then you get that one and they want to, fudge things. Can't do it.
No, it'll
Can't
always
do it.
come
We
back and
play
bite
by the
you.
rules.
It will
Yeah.
bite you in the ass every time.
Yep.
It just does.
It's unethical. It's immoral.
Right.
I'm protected by the Constitution. So is the person that we're investigating. It's just
Yes.
how it is.
Yep.
So if it's for one,
Absolutely.
it's for everyone.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So Anka Melinda Kalulu asks, I'd love her to talk us through the main steps of investigating a homicide from a CSI perspective and talk about how CSI teams work with detectives, yeah, or sometimes not,
Or don't.
and police officers in general. Also, I'd love to hear what are some of the most disturbing things she has encountered at a crime scene and what determined her to make the career choice. I think we kind of the career choice thing, but
It
kind of walk
fascinated
us
me.
through the steps of investigating a homicide from your perspective. What are I'll start out with, you're on your way. What are you thinking?
Well, it starts off with me asleep at 2 a.m. and I get a phone call.
Okay.
That's where it starts.
Okay.
Because it always happens at 2 a.m. I couldn't tell you
Yes.
why, but that's the witching hour. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So I get the call, I drag myself out of bed, throw my uniform on, try to like do something with this. And then I usually get there within 30 to 45 minutes. If it's on
Okay.
the other side of the county, which is big, it'll take an hour.
Yeah.
But by this point, they've probably been on scene for 2 to 3 hours.
Sure.
Patrol gets there, they do their thing, secure the scene, and then they call CID, the detectives, who then make the call to call us, or if they want the part-time people to do it. So I'm driving there. If it's a homicide, we're going always.
Sure.
So I'm driving there. We have 2 really big response vehicles that have everything in them that you could think of.
Okay.
So we'll go to the office and we'll pick up one of those, drive that bus over there. And then when we get there, there'll be a scene detective or someone, sometimes it's a CID supervisor. They'll walk us through the scene. We have our little, pen and paper ready to go, taking notes. And then, well, let me stop right there and say, probably the coolest part of my job is walking under the crime scene tape. It doesn't matter how tired I am or how pissed I am. This is my 3rd call out of the week. When you pull that up and you walk on, you feel like a badass. It's my favorite part.
Well, I tell you what, when I was a new cop, I felt like I was doing something wrong. You have it drilled into your head, your entire life. It's like, you don't cross that.
Stay outside.
It's like, yeah, now it's your job, dummy. It's
Mhm.
like, go in there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on TV when I do that. It's
That's
pretty
awesome.
So, then we figure out who's going to take the case, who's primary and who's backup. And then pretty much from there, we work off a checklist and we do it so that we do it the same way every time.
That makes
Because
sense.
if you don't, you're going to forget steps.
Yeah.
At least I will. I'll always forget things. So we literally work off a checklist. We have a scanner. We have a really fancy 3D scanner now. So they call it the time vampire because it takes forever to scan a scene. But then you can walk through it 3D and you can show a jury and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is that like a camera on a tripod kind of deal?
It
Or
is.
like
It
surveying
spins.
equipment?
It is surveying equipment.
Yeah.
We just kind of adopted it for our
Mhm.
purposes, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So after we get done with that, and then we start evidence collection. Sometimes there's a body. Sometimes rescue will come and work on the body and take them to the hospital. But if the body's there, we'll do that first. We take pictures of them. We take pictures of all of them. The RME's office has an investigator that will come out, a death investigator. So they come out and they take their pictures and, we open up their eyes and we take pictures of their eyes and hands for defensive wounds and tattoos. And we try to see where they were shot and we'll document all that. And then we bag them up and they get taken to the ME's office for their autopsy. And then we just start picking up usually cartridge cases and we'll do it one thing at a time. This is where it gets tedious. Right. I'm going to take this cartridge case is my first item. I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to draw it on a sketch and I'm going to photograph it. I already said that. Put it on my little list, my checklist, and then I pick it up.
Now,
And
do
then I
you
go
have
to the next one.
those little yellow tents with the numbers?
We do. We like
Plastic,
to use
yeah.
them with the scanner.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
we really started using them then. We didn't use it a lot before.
Hmm.
But and then it's just, if you've got 75 cartridge cases, you do that 75 times. It's a little tedious.
Just a little
Um,
bit.
as
Oh,
far as contacting or working with CID, sometimes there's a detective there. Sometimes they're really short and they can't send anyone. So in that case, it's a supervisor.
okay.
We always have a supervisor of ours on scene, and they usually have one too.
Okay. Now,
These days, if we know the detective, we'll just call them on our phones.
okay,
Ask them a question. But
sure.
sometimes they're in interviews or whatever.
Gotcha. Now, collecting evidence. Evidence could be anything from the murder weapon to blood, or, what's the best practice for collecting blood?
So our kind of domain for evidence is physical, right? So tangible, you can see it, you can pick it
Hmm.
up, you can that kind of thing. As opposed to witness testimony, which is
Right.
evidence, or digital evidence, that
Sure.
kind of thing. It's an item
Yeah.
that could be evidence, which is DNA, fingerprints,
Hmm.
um, cartridge cases are big because they can trace that to the gun.
Right.
Um, it all kind of depends on the circumstances of the case as to what
Sure.
you collect.
Now, what's the easiest way to collect blood or like bodily fluid?
We'd usually just swab it.
Okay.
It would just
So,
take little cotton tip swabs with the
do,
cap on it and swab it up.
do you ever like cut out carpeting
Oh
or
yeah,
drywall, that kind
we'll
of
cut
stuff?
out carpeting, drywall. Yeah, take pieces of glass,
Yeah.
door
Or,
jams. We've taken door jams before. We've also taken entire doors. We just take it
okay.
off the hinges. We've done
Okay.
that before too.
Now you see on TV where the detective, will take out his pocket knife. There's like a bullet fragment in the wood, like say, the area where
Mhm.
somebody was shot. They take out their
Yeah.
pocket knife and they dig it out. What's the best practice for doing that?
You can use whatever you want as long as you don't touch the bullet. If
Okay.
you touch the bullet with some sort of a metal object, it's gonna mess up the markings.
Oh, the
So the
striation thing.
evidence
Yeah.
is now
Mhm.
it's kind of degraded. So really, we've used reciprocating saws. We've had bullets in a stud. I'll just take the whole piece of stud out. We'll just
Okay.
saw it on either side.
Sweet.
So really, whatever gets the job done, you don't touch it, so you don't, you preserve the evidence.
Right.
I mean,
Cool.
sometimes it is whatever gets the job done.
Okay.
Things get
Now,
crazy.
yeah.
It's
So
always different.
it is. It is. Now, she also said, what was some of the most disturbing things you've encountered at a crime scene?
Well, there's usually there's usually blood, although people don't bleed as much when they get shot as people think. Sometimes they do, often they
Yeah.
don't. It's just a
Right.
little
Yeah.
bit of blood. But I was on a murder suicide January, and there was blood. There was a lot of blood, probably the most I've ever seen,
Mm.
because he shot her in the head and then he shot himself. And her skull was essentially in pieces.
Oh.
So the blood on the floor had congealed and it was like that thick. I mean,
Ugh.
it was deep and you had to walk through it. We picked up the bodies, put them in the
Ah.
body bag, and you had to walk through it. And I ended up with blood literally smeared up to my knees. There was
Oh.
just no way around it. It was on my pants. I threw the pants away. I threw
Oh
my
yeah,
boots
there's no
away.
saving that. I always threw
Yeah.
that stuff out. I'm like, nope, going in the garbage.
That was a first for me. We deal with a lot of blood, but I have never had that much on me.
Do you ever bring in a serologist for like blood spatter? Like Dexter did.
We actually have a little bit of our own training on
Okay.
blood spatter patterns. It rarely comes down to that. It is a blue moon when the case will come down to an actual spatter pattern
Okay.
that we need that information. But as far as the basics, we're all trained in that. We've taken classes,
Okay.
and I can tell you, I can take photos of it to have it examined later
Hmm.
by an expert, or most of the time we'll just testify to it ourselves in court because we've
Right.
had enough training
Okay.
to look at it and it tells us what we need to know.
Yeah, because I mean, one of my last homicides that I was on, it was a stabbing, and
Mhm.
you had the defensive wounds of the victim
Mhm.
that's grabbing the blade,
Yep.
and then you have the guy doing the stabbing, and there was a lot of thrashing, and it looked like a sprinkler almost. There was blood like on the
Yeah.
walls,
Yep.
that pattern, and then there was little droplets going out the door. So it's like, oh, the bad
Yeah.
guy got stabbed.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Maybe.
I told my guys, I said, start going to hospitals in this area
Yeah.
because this
Hmm.
guy's cut. And sure shit,
Hmm.
there's dude. And it's like, wow, that worked out well.
I just got the certificate back for blood that we found on a homicide suspect's boot, and it came back to the victim. That was pretty cool. He
Oh
didn't
wow.
get shot, or he didn't get injured.
Yeah.
We didn't think he did, but that was pretty cool. And I think they ask about the most interesting. I just thought of one. I worked a case where two guys, it was a robbery gone bad. The driver and the guy sitting right behind him, they killed each other. They shot each other and killed each other. And it looked like that on the scene. And I was like, there's no way. There's
Isn't
no
that weird?
way.
That
Yeah. And
that
the
does
lead
not
detective was
happen
like,
often at
wouldn't it be
all.
something if they shot each other? But we took the vehicle back to our office. We have a big garage bay,
Hmm.
and I did the trajectory on it. And sure enough, the other two guys didn't shoot. It was just these two, and they shot each other and they died right
We
there in the
had
car.
Wow. We had a pimp on pimp killing. Two pimps were arguing over the girls, and they took out their guns and they shot each other like simultaneously. So it was pimp on pimp killing. I mean, we had a ton of witnesses, blah blah blah, and it's like, no way, that doesn't happen.
Never thought
And
I'd see that.
the ultimate irony of the entire thing was we subcontract, we call them the body snatchers, the people that worked for the ME's office for a while.
Mm,
It was a funeral home, and then it was like whatever, and
yeah,
now it's county.
yeah.
And this white Escalade shows up, and that's what the funeral home was using, this huge white Escalade for, and one of the pimps had a white Escalade, so they're
Oh, no.
parked next to each other. And I'm like, now that's ironic. You're going out
That's the
like the
good
way you
stuff.
came to the scene, dude.
Uh-huh.
Ugh,
That's
going
funny.
going out in style. All right. So let's wrap this up. Oh, real quick. Autopsies. Do you do a lot of autopsies?
Uh, we actually don't go anymore.
Really?
Some ME got a bug in their bonnet about us going to take. We used to go and take photographs.
Yeah. And
If
if
they did
like
their autopsy, we would take our own photographs because the pictures they take are shit. I mean, they
right,
just,
plus if there's evidence like, like a bullet inside of a body or something, somebody's got to recover that.
we
There's
do
pain to
still
recover.
take that once they've taken it out of the body. But so we can go to autopsies, but we don't do anything but pick up the evidence now, which sucks because I
Yeah.
loved autopsies. Talk about fascinating. We have at our office, we have the medical examiners, but we also have what we call cutters.
Hmm.
They're techs, and they're the one that actually do all the
Right.
incisions, they
Right.
cut the bones, and um, but some of them you just go and be like, what's that? And they'll tell you, what gland that is, or what
Cool.
organ it is.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. I missed that. That was very interesting.
I'm surprised. We had so many homicides that it typically the lead detective would go to the autopsy
Mhm.
with a CSI person
But
to
that's exactly how we used to do it.
yeah,
Somebody
and
got pissed off at whatever, and they wouldn't let us do it anymore.
that's so silly. But what happened was we had so many homicides and not enough detectives or CSI
Yeah.
people still are going. They brought somebody out of retirement and they made like a little job for him. So his
Hmm.
job is going to autopsies all day.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's fascinating.
it is. It is. All right, let's wrap this up. What's in your future? What are we looking at here?
I have no idea. More
Okay.
books, definitely.
Okay.
I'm kind of at a point in my life. I'm gonna keep working and see what happens.
Okie dokie.
But definitely, I'm working on my books. So
Oh,
it's slow, but keep at it.
all right. So if people want to find out more about you and your books, where do they go?
rjstrongbooks.com.
Okay.
I have an email contact there, so anyone can drop me a line. I will do my best to get back to you. I don't get a lot of emails, so it'll be pretty easy.
Okay.
And then RJ Strong on Amazon. My two thriller books are available wide. Perry Mortem is only on Amazon for the time being, so
Okay.
it's in Kindle Unlimited as well. But I have an author page there. They can go there as well.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Becky. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for having me, Patrick. It has been fun.